Hi everybody, Adam Guthrie here, the founder of I Feel Good magazine, and I'm really excited today because we have another plant-based practitioner joining me for a chat today. Her name is Emma Strutt, and she is a nutritionist, a dietitian, and a yoga teacher. Plus, she's got a certificate in plant-based nutrition, and she's got a really good website that you want to check out. It's called greenstuffnutrition.com. So, Emma, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I'm really well. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm super good. Always good. That's what happens when you eat plants, right?
Yep.
So you've got an interesting story. You know, you've become a dietitian and a nutritionist, but you yourself are actually a whole food plant-based. You're vegan. I'd like to, before we get into, who you help and who you serve and why you got interested in nutrition, why did you become vegan and how long have you been vegan?
Okay. I've been a vegan for 11 years now, I think. I'm in my 11th year. And it's a bit of a long story, I suppose. So I've always been interested in nutrition. I was a competitive swimmer when I was younger, and I medaled at nationals and all of that kind of stuff. So I was more interested in it from a performance point of view. And I grew up in a small farming community in Queensland, so I never really, thought about veganism, vegetarianism. I didn't even know one single vegetarian growing up. But then I suppose I had my quarter-life crisis a little bit early. So I ran off to Asia for a few months, and I ended up at a yoga centre for about a month and a half doing a course. And each night we'd have lectures on philosophy and ethics. And one night there was a lecture on the ethics of eating animals. And it kind of it struck me. I'd never put two and two together before. I'd had pet cows growing up and I loved them so very dearly, but I never associated that with the food that was on my plate. I just hadn't made that connection. So after that, I went vegetarian and I stayed that way for about a year because I did a bit more traveling through South America and stuff, so I didn't really have time to research it properly. But then when I got back to Australia, I stumbled across Animals Australia. So I started to kind of inform myself a little bit about the food production system in Australia, so how dairy ends up on our shelves and how eggs do, and that didn't really sit very well with me. Not long after, I watched the documentary Earthlings, which kind of scarred me for life, to be honest. I still have flashbacks 10 years later. But I just had no idea how horrific the animal food system was. So vegan overnight after that. And then it was all happened in very quick succession here. About a month later, I read a little known book called The China Study, and that's probably how I got into whole food plant-based.
Wow, that's amazing. So it started with yoga. That's so interesting because, I know I've got a lot of friends who are yoga teachers and instructors and who do yoga, and I practice yoga too. And it's really interesting. Yoga, once you start doing yoga, I found that everybody then gets naturally drawn to eating plants as opposed to animals. It just starts to happen. Or sometimes people that start to eat plants end up getting drawn to yoga. Have you found the same thing?
I have, absolutely, yes.
What's your take on that? Why do you think that happens?
Oh, well, I suppose it has a lot to do with, I'm getting a little bit woo-woo here, so not scientifically based, okay, but the energy that, you're putting into your food and what you're taking from that food. And, I mean, animal products aren't produced with loving energy, are they? There's a lot of violence and negative vibes that go into that, I suppose. So, just yoga, you're kind of getting a good energy flow. Plant-based food, it's the same thing. They just go hand in hand, really.
Yeah, totally. So you read the China Study.
I did.
Were you a nutritionist and dietitian at this stage, or were?
No, I wasn't. I was studying remedial massage at the time because that's what I thought I wanted to do. Yeah. But then I read this book and it just blew my mind. Because like I'd had chronic health conditions. I've sat in front of multiple doctors. No one's ever mentioned this. We've got cancer, heart disease, diabetes in my family. Those family members had never had this information mentioned to them before. Like it was just not widely known in the health community. So I was still studying at the time, the massage, but my passion, my trajectory just changed. Like it just became all about plant-based nutrition. And I was, because I was angry that I hadn't heard this before. Like we'd known for decades that some of our biggest killers could be prevented and even reversed through the power of whole food plant-based nutrition. So I finished up massage, tried to work in that space for about a year, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. Meantime, I'd done the eCornell course. I'd read anything I could get my hands on. So Cardwell Esselstyn's work, Dean Ornish, John McDougall. Like this was back in the day before Forks Over Knives or What the Health or anything like that. So I wasn't aware of, everything that was out there. But yeah, after that, I just thought, I cannot just sit by and let this go unknown. There's so many people that this could help. So that's why I decided eventually to go back and study dietetics.
Awesome. And what a drive, It makes me angry too because, I had a heart attack and I wasn't told about a whole food plant-based diet could reverse it. I was just told I was going to be on meds forever. And the fact that you got that knowledge and you weren't sick, you're healthy, but you got that knowledge, but you knew that it could help people. There's the yogi coming out in you. A passion to help and serve. And that's so good. So you went and started to study nutrition, yeah, after that?
Yeah. So
tell me what's involved in studying nutrition.
So there's a lot of heavy science. It's basically a pre-med course. So you do a lot of physiology, chemistry, biochemistry, pathophys, that kind of thing. And then in, year 3 and 4, then you start to do more of the nutrition subjects. At the time, so this was a while ago, this was before the 2016 position paper came out saying that plant-based diets can be healthy for every life stage. So it was a little bit different back then. I remember there was one particular case study we had in one course, and the case study, we had to debate it in class, and it was, is putting a child on a plant-based diet a form of child abuse?
Whoa.
So we did learn a little bit about vegetarian eating, but we didn't really touch on, we had a lecture on nutrition and heart disease, and Dean Ornish, Cardwell Esselstyn wasn't mentioned once. It was just Mediterranean DASH diet, that kind of thing. So it had challenges.
Has that changed now? Do they talk about?
Yes. Yeah, I've got a few friends that are student dietitians at the moment, and there's a much more emphasis on the power of plants these days, which is fantastic.
Well, the evidence is there; it can't be ignored. So if the education system's not providing that information, there's something wrong because it works.
Yeah. And dietitians, we're evidence-based practitioners, and in my mind, that's the best available evidence there is for some of these conditions. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. So it's 4 years, yeah?
Yep.
And then you started your own practice, or did you do something else after you finished?
So initially I worked in the hospital system for a while. I didn't really last very long there, to be honest, because I didn't find it very rewarding. It's really important work, don't get me wrong, but you're only seeing patients, 1-2 times maybe before they're discharged, and you're seeing them at their worst. They don't really want to talk about the benefits of whole food plant-based. They're just worried about staying alive, basically.
Yeah.
I did that for a while and then just thought, no, this is not really for me. I'm not really helping people. So then I started the private practice.
Yeah. Let's just talk about the hospital for a bit. So what sort of people were you talking to in the hospital if they were at their worst? What sort of conditions did they have?
So I was working on a few different wards, but a lot of the time I was seeing surgical patients. So a lot of gut stuff, which was quite interesting. So they might have just had, a really bad bout of Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. They might have just got a stoma put in because of bowel cancer. They might have diverticular disease, or, like pancreatitis or things like that. So you can really do a lot in that space with whole food plant-based nutrition, but basically it's just about making sure they're getting enough protein and energy so they don't get malnourished while they're in hospital, because they're in a inflammatory state, so their metabolism goes through the roof. So mainly it's all about making sure they don't lose too much weight.
Yeah, okay. They keep calories higher.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
So there's a lot of supplements. We basically dish out a lot of supplements. So things like Sustagen and Ensure and things like that. I mean, we work with the kitchen as best we can, but public health system funds are very tight. So there's only so much you can do in that space. I was lucky at the hospital I worked at. They actually had plant-based meal options. So there were vegan meal options for anyone who wanted them, and they were pretty decent quality. And one of the projects I did while I was there was a bit of a menu review. So I was able to get it a little bit more vegan friendly while I was there.
Oh, awesome. I remember when I was in intensive care for the heart attack, I had a vegan, meal. Like they fed me vegan. And it was awesome. It was like, I had casseroles and beans with heaps of beans in them and leafy greens and salads. It was like, oh, wow, this is just like at home, That was so good. And I'd hate to see what the other food looked like, though. Well, it might have been good, I don't know. But the vegan stuff was really good. So if you seeing that you've been in that hospital system, if you could change it in any way, if you had that power, what would you change in the hospitals in regards to, nutrition and treating patients and getting them prepared to leave?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm hoping that we might be able to chip away at that with Doctors for Nutrition, which is what I'm involved with, but we'll get to that in a tick. What I would change is probably making the kitchens, if we had unlimited budget, of course, like a cook fresh kitchen, so not relying so much on the frozen processed kind of food. I'd want to see like the plant-based option be front and centre, especially on, the cardiac wards and diabetics. Like they need to know this stuff, so it needs to be like pushed to the forefront basically. I wouldn't want to force anything on anyone, but just more education as to why this is important. I think. Yeah.
So you'd start with the kitchen.
Absolutely.
That's where it all starts, right? Eating the food.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it that most of these conditions are caused by the food, and they also can be reversed or prevented by the food? Is that true?
Yeah, so a lot of the chronic health conditions, for sure. Some things, no, like some things genetics does play a part for, but for the majority, absolutely. Yep, you can definitely prevent most of them.
So what is a whole food plant-based diet, the way you eat?
So whole food plant-based diet to me is basically including lots of veggies, lots of fruit, lots of legumes, lots of whole grains, small amounts of nuts and seeds, and I don't tend to use any oil either. So I don't use oil, no processed stuff. So it is quite different to a vegan diet. Like I'm vegan first and foremost for ethical reasons, but a vegan diet can include Magnums and Oreos and chips, and that's different. Yeah, exactly. So that's a big difference. Just basing your diet on whole, unprocessed foods the way nature intended it, basically.
Now, when you became vegan and vegetarian, was it difficult for you to make that shift?
No, it really wasn't. So because I was coming from an ethical point of view, that's what I was going to do. That wasn't it. I didn't have any second thoughts about it. I grew up like addicted to cheese sandwiches, and I hated vegetables. And so cheese, like everyone says, cheese is a little bit of an issue. So I sometimes missed that. But yeah, it wasn't difficult once you kind of know how that food is produced. Easy decision.
How do you produce it? How do you make this food? Because that's the biggest challenge. I suppose you see it with your patients as well. How did you learn how to cook this way? Because the principles, like you said, it's eating more whole plants and vegetables and fruits and a little bit of nuts and seeds and legumes and grains. How did you learn? Because that's a different way for a lot of people in Australia. Like a lot of Australians now just eat a lot of processed food, ready-made, or they still eat, the meat and free veg, or they just eat meat and loads of dairy. So coming from that point where someone is in that space, how do you get your mind around preparing food like this? Because it is different. It's a different skill set. But once you get it, it's pretty easy, yeah? So how did you teach yourself, and what are the little tips that you started to adopt to be able to get this good food onto your plate?
Well, buy a whole bunch of cookbooks to begin with. Like if you've got no idea, just go out and buy some cookbooks. I think that's initially what I did. I was really lucky because I was on the Sunshine Coast at the time, so there's already that alternative kind of aspect to that, and I had a health food store within walking distance, so I'd frequent that quite a bit. Sometimes there'd be information nights, so if you have access to that, go along to that. Cough, cough, what you're doing at the moment would be fantastic for anyone new.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, absolutely. But also trying to find a support network as well. So people who have been doing this, like I reached out to a few people so they could give me some tips and some tricks. So it's about finding like-minded people, building up that social support network and just experimenting a little bit. So I'm lucky I like cooking and I had a bit of time to be able to spend time in the kitchen. There were a few hits, few misses initially, but you get there and it's just a fun kind of, it's a fun road to just try different things.
What's your favourite meal?
Oh, that's so difficult.
What's the one that you eat every week without fail?
I do like a good stir fry. I really do like my Asian stuff, but Mediterranean's good too. Indian's good. I can't choose.
Stir fry. I love stir fry too, and they're super easy to make,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they're super healthy. So what sort of people do you get coming to see you? What sort of conditions do they have? And
yeah, so I do see a few vegans, vegetarians, whole food plant-based eaters, but the majority of patients I see have been referred by the doctors with a chronic health condition. So lots of heart disease, lots of diabetes, hypertension, autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or MS, Crohn's disease, that kind of thing. So, yeah, a lot of chronic health conditions.
Okay. And how do you help them with incorporating a whole food plant-based diet to treat these diseases? That's what you do, right? You actually help people do that and you recommend that. So if someone came to you, like let's use me as an example, because I had a heart attack. Let's say I came out of hospital and, when you come out of hospital, they send you to this heart rehabilitation course, rightio? And that was good because it got me moving again. But the food, after eating the China study, I'm going, oh my God, this food they're still recommending is going to kill me. Still eating meat, just cut the fat off it, still eating dairy, but low-fat dairy, all this sort of stuff. So if I was to come to you straight out of hospital and wanted to start going down this path, what would be the things that you would recommend I do and advise me to do and teach me to do to get going? And remember that, I'm so addicted to sugar and I'm so addicted to fatty foods and I hate leafy greens. I hate vegetables.
Yeah, okay.
But would that be a scenario that you would get, like with some people?
Absolutely. Like my practice is based in a rural farming community, so that comes with its own unique set of problems there.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's people that want to jump straight in, which is fantastic, and I'll support them 100% with that. But other times, like I always tell them that this is the best available evidence, but some people just kind of aren't ready to jump in head first. So you work with them where they're at. I find a really non-confrontational way to approach this is to talk about the blue zones. So, you know, they might not be willing to go 100% plant-based, but they might be willing to incorporate some more legumes or just start playing around with leafy greens or adding some more whole grains into their diet. So, yeah, for some people it's very baby steps and you kind of step them through that process. I'll do like grocery shopping tours with them as well to show them what exactly to get and what aisles to avoid. And every now and then they wouldn't be as good as yours, but sometimes I do like a cooking workshop with people as well. So I can sit there in the office and talk till I'm blue in the face, but without these practical skills, it's going to be really hard for them to actually implement this at home.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, that's the knowledge is there and we all can access that. I've found over the years, it's been 10 years now, and I've been helping people eat this way for, I think, 7 years, 6 years. And it's the same thing. Everyone knows what to do. Some it's new to, they don't know, but for most people that have started the journey, they know what to do, but they just can't get themselves to do it. The practical steps are missing. And that's what I teach people to do, is to give them the practical skills. That's why I love that you take them to the supermarket and the shopping. So tell me, where do you shop in the supermarket? What aisles do you avoid?
Most of the middle ones, to be honest. Stick to the outside, that's where all the fresh stuff is, and you just do a mad dash in every now and then to get like your canned legumes and, whole grain pastas and whatnot. So
yeah. It's like putting the blinkers on, going down that aisle.
And that chip and lolly and soft drink aisle, don't even think about going down there.
That's true, It's like those two aisles, like the chip aisle and the soft drink and the chocolate aisle and biscuit aisle, they're sort of like next to each other in the supermarket. Yeah. And those two aisles, like, I never venture down them, ever. Yeah. It's like, there's nothing I need down there. But it could be hard when you're so addicted to that,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's important to actually avoid them, because willpower only works for so long, right? So you've got to kind of change your environment, change your thinking to be successful at it.
Yeah. How do you help people change their thinking? Like, have you got tools to help that?
Yeah, so I've developed a few worksheets. I'll often, direct them to some really good YouTube things from, Doug Lyle or Bright Line Eating, if there is any kind of like legitimate food addiction. But oftentimes I'll incorporate kind of aspects of yoga as well, so mindfulness and meditation and stress management, because oftentimes people are turning towards these foods because, they're looking for some kind of emotional comfort. So you've got to look at the person holistically and see what else is going on in their life, and, stress, sleep, social support, like it all kind of plays a part.
Yeah, totally. That holistic view. And I agree with you that, most people do go to those foods because they're stressed. They don't want to experience the emotion. They shove all the emotions down with the food, so they don't have to deal with it. And
absolutely.
So Doug Lyle's excellent. The second person in a couple of weeks that's
really?
Yeah, has said the same thing. And, I'm familiar with Doug Lyle's work as well. So, yeah, guys, if you are struggling with habit change, Doug Lyle's a great resource. The Pleasure Trap is the name of his book.
Yeah. Pleasure Trap's fantastic. And he also has some really good YouTube clips on cram circuits and the ego trap as well, which kind of all comes into play.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's go back to growing up on the farm. I grew up on acres as well, and I had pet cows. Yeah. Why is it that we didn't, in your mind, why didn't you see the connection to that little calf being what's on the plate? I mean, it's just like,
Yeah, I still kind of ponder this sometimes, to be honest. I think because I was young and impressionable and I was really involved in my sport, from a competitive point of view, I was being told like I needed to have that protein and animal protein to make sure that I was competing well. So you kind of just drink that Kool-Aid, I suppose. I wish I had started thinking about this earlier, but yeah, I don't know. I just, who I was surrounded with, all of my friends were farmers, whether they be like cattle farmers or, growing onions or carrots or whatever, but I just didn't know any vegetarians at all. So it never really crossed my mind to make that connection. And looking back now, I have no idea why, because I was just like the biggest animal lover. My pet cow Mooey just still has a special place in my heart. But yeah, I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I remember when I was about 10, my parents bought me my first air rifle, and I remember sitting on the hill and a little bird was sitting on the fence, and I remember just going, and it just fell off, and I killed it, and first thing I'd ever killed in my life, and I thought to myself, I actually started to cry, and I thought, this little bird could have been young like me and had its whole life ahead of it. I just took that life away. And even then, though, I was 10 years old, I still didn't link it to, mum cooking us, meat and free veg and the chops and the sausages and bacon and stuff every day. I still didn't link it. And it wasn't until, I was 21 when I came across the yogic path that I started to realise that, there's no need for pain and suffering in the world. Yeah. And obviously that happened to you at your yoga retreat, and we can survive well without it. So tell me, can we get everything we need on a whole food plant-based diet? The very first question. Yeah, answer that one first. Go.
Yeah, with the exception of B12. I mean, technically you can get small amounts of vitamin B12 in certain foods, like certain mushrooms might have a very small percentage of B12 in it. If you're eating tempeh from Indonesia, because of the way it's produced there, you'll get a little bit of B12. But B12 is actually produced by bacteria. And in Australia, because our food system and our hygiene system is so tightly controlled, you're not going to be getting any amounts of vitamin B12 that will actually cover all of your needs. So it's in animals because they eat the grass and the dirt, and they're also supplemented with B12 these days. So that's why B12 is in animal foods. So if you're doing a strict whole food plant-based diet, you will need to supplement or have regular fortified foods. But everything else, absolutely, you can cover it by eating plants.
It's true. You can get it everywhere. So what about, let's go back to the B12. It's a microorganism that's in the soil, yeah?
Yeah.
And I suppose years ago we would have, if we were just eating vegetables out of our garden, or
drinking from the stream, like we
would get our B12 then, just like animals would get it, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we wanted to go back to an alternate lifestyle like that, we probably could get our B12 if we got our bloods tested every year and they're fine. We know we're getting it from the soil and the stream. But the reality is none of us live like that anymore. Very few of us do.
Exactly. And I mean, we're not getting poisoned by dirty water either, which is always a plus. So
that's right. So what do you advise your patients to do if they want to get their B12?
I would just say the easiest way would be a supplement. You can either take a small dose each day, or you can have a bigger dose, like 1,000 micrograms a couple of times a week. It doesn't really cost that much. I think it ends up costing, like $30 a year or something, depending on which one you get. So it's just, take a supplement.
Yeah.
Easy.
So what do? Do you do the spray under the tongue or?
No, I have a sublingual one that I chew.
Ah, okay. Which one's that?
At the moment, I'm using the Diva one, but I've used just one from the chemist before, the Thompson brand. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I use I can't remember the brand, but it's in a little spray bottle, and it's either this pink colour. I'll just spray it under my tongue.
I'll have to give that one a go.
Yeah, I'll send you a pic of the brand, but it's my B12's always been good every time I've got it taken, so it obviously works. And I just take a spray,
Yeah.
once a day or every couple of days.
Yeah, and it's not just vegans and vegetarians that should be worried about B12. So as we age, we actually reduce our ability to convert B12. So older Australians in general should be supplementing. And the doctor's surgery I work at, there are a few people that need to get B12 injections. Not one of them is a vegan. So like across the board, it's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, us vegans, we know about it, so we're taking it. The others have to go and get a shot to top up.
Yeah.
So what happens if you become B12 deficient?
Okay, so if you just have a mild deficiency, you can get a particular type of anemia, so you'll feel pretty rubbish, but it is really, really crucial for nerve functioning. So don't let this slide, like take your supplement, because if this actually continues on long term, you can get irreversible nerve damage. And there's been a few case studies where people have actually had spinal cord issues because they've been severely B12 deficient. So
yeah, so it's super important that we take it if we're if we're on a vegan, whole food, plant-based diet, or if we're aging.
Yeah.
Cool. So what about protein? Like everybody asks that question, where do we get our protein? And, for us who have been down the path a long time, it gets a bit tiresome, that question. However, I don't see it as tiresome anymore. I actually love when people ask that question, because that is the very first question that people ask when they get interested in going down this path. So it's like I get excited. I say, oh, someone's about to make a change in their life and start eating this way. So when you get that question, how do you explain to people about protein and the importance of it and where we get it and how much we should have?
Yeah, so it definitely is very important. I don't want to kind of undersell the importance of protein in the body. It's not just used for building muscle, but it's also used for like a range of different things. But a bit of common sense goes a long way in this space. So if you actually step back and have a look at what protein actually is, it's made up of different amino acids. So they're kind of like the building blocks of protein as a whole. And we can get all of our amino acid needs through plants. I mean, if you have a look at the biggest, strongest animals in the world, they eat plants. So it's just a matter of getting enough of their certain amino acids. So most of them are considered non-essential, meaning the body can actually make them for themselves. There's a few that are considered essential, so we need to actually eat them. And there's probably only two that I would make mention of when you're following a plant-based diet. So that's lysine and methionine. So certain plant foods don't have big amounts of these particular amino acids, but as long as you're eating a varied diet with all of the core food groups throughout the day, you'll be getting more than you need. So in Australia, the average female needs about 46 grams a day. The average male needs a bit more, at about 64 grams. And we've got really good research from the Adventist Health Studies, and they've kind of pulled all the data together and looked at the protein intake of vegans, and the median intake was 71 grams. So, yeah. As long as you're eating...
Look after our metabolic rate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then build a bit of muscle if we want.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned there, if we eat a variety of things throughout the day, we're going to get enough of it. What are the sort of things that we need to have on our plate for us to know that we're going to get, our 50 to 60 grams of protein a day?
Yeah. So probably the best protein sources on a plant-based diet would be, number one, your legumes and your soy products, so things like edamame, tofu and tempeh. Soy is actually a really excellent source. It's considered a complete protein, including a good amount of, and legumes for anyone that doesn't know. So that's things like lentils, chickpeas, split peas, mung beans, baked beans. If you eat baked beans, like all of the legumes are fantastic. You can't go wrong with any of them. They're all good options. So whatever one you like, make sure you're including them.
Yeah.
A serve would be about a cup. So you can eat as much as you want. Maybe ease into it if you've never had these before, because you might get a little bit gassy. It'll be party time down in your gut because your gut bacteria will be loving it so much. So transitioning in slow for anyone who's never had a legume before. And then also whole grains are a really good source as well. So quinoa particularly is a really good source of protein. But like proteins in everything, even fruit has protein. I mean,
even
potatoes.
lettuce does.
Yeah, exactly. So everything has protein. It's just about making sure you're having a good mixture of food throughout the day so you get all of the amino acids you need. And we used to think that you needed to pair certain foods at meals, so beans and rice together. Not so. Like, we now know that our body has amino acid pools that we can actually draw on. So as long as we're having a good variety, we're going to be covering our bases.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It makes me feel better because I'm eating that sort of stuff. Like my bowls, my plates are usually bowls, and I always have like at least 2 handfuls of leafy greens, whether they're cooked or raw. I have a legume or a potato, a root vegetable, or I have some grain, and I have lots of different vegetables, either cooked or raw, in those bowls. And I just have a little bit of nuts and seeds and a little bit of avocado, quarter of an avocado a day and a tablespoon of nuts and seeds a day. And I must be getting all the protein I need because I've been like having this for 10 years and was able to reverse heart disease.
Absolutely, So I put together something called like the Plant-Based High Five, and if you follow that, you basically will cover everything. So it's 1 serve of flax or chia a day, 2 or more serves of legumes, 3 serves of fruit, 4 serves of whole grains, and at least 5 serves of veggies. So if you're doing that every day, you'll be getting everything you need.
When you say 5 serves, what quantity is that?
Yeah, so for cooked veggies, it's about half a cup. For salad veggies, it's a cup because they're, quite airy. So you can just make a little fistful, heaped fist of veggies is about 1 serve. So it's really, really easy to get 5 serves in. And ideally we should be getting more, but that's a kind of a base.
Yeah. So, and that's easy for people to do. You can make a nice curry or do a stir fry,
Absolutely.
You're done. So tell me about the flax seeds and the chia and hemp and things like that. Why is it important that we take a little bit of that every day?
Yep. So there's some essential fatty acids that we need. One of them is omega-3, and there's 3 types of omega-3. So there's a short-chain omega-3 called ALA, and our body can't produce that, so it's considered essential. We need to have it in our diet. And then there's EPA and DHA. They're longer-chain fatty acids, and our body can actually convert ALA into EPA and then EPA into DHA. So our body uses all 3 and we need all 3. But as far as plant-based diets go, we're only getting the ALA, which is fine as long as we're eating enough. So flax and chia and hemp, walnuts to a certain extent as well, they're really, really good sources of the omega-3s. And if we have enough of the omega-3s, we know we'll be able to convert all the way through to EPA and DHA. So that's kind of
which are a longer chain fatty acid. Why are the longer chain fatty acids important?
So all of the omega-3s are important for neural development, anti-inflammatory. So there's a lot of studies linking it with better outcomes for cognition, heart health. It's just something you definitely want to be including in your diet there. But it also kind of comes down to the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. So vegans and vegetarians, if you're relying on a lot of processed kind of junky food, your omega-6s will go way up and your omega-3s won't be very high. And your omega-6 and omega-3s, they actually, I'm sorry if I'm getting a bit too scientific
No, this is
here.
good. I'm interested.
They actually share a similar pathway for conversion. So there's a lot of overlap. And if you have too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, you can actually kind of overwhelm the system, so to speak, and you reduce your omega-3 conversion by up to 40%. So you really want to kind of get that balance right, so you're allowing your body to convert ALA into EPA, EPA into DHA.
Okay, and what's the ratio of the omega-3 and omega-6?
Ideally, you should be aiming for probably less than 4-1, so omega-6 4, omega-3 1. Okay. And at the moment, anywhere between like 10-1, 20-1 is kind of what the average Australian is sitting around, maybe even higher if you're having more processed food. So
what is it about the processed food that has the omega-6? What makes the processed foods high in omega-6?
The vegetable oils, basically.
So it's the vegetable oils. Processed oils are high in omega-6.
Most of them are, yeah. And that's another thing to just note with the nuts and the seeds. Very, very healthy for you, but maybe don't go crazy on them, because most of them will have more omega-6s than omega-3. And some have minimal omega-3, like minimal. So, walnuts are probably your best nut as far as that goes. And then, of course, your flax, chia and hemp.
Yeah. So what that would look like on a daily basis, you wouldn't eat any of the processed foods, and you would just have, maybe a tablespoon of nuts a day. And if you had a tablespoon so the nuts would give you the omega-6s, yeah? And then if you had a tablespoon of flax or chia or hemp, that would give you your omega-3s. And would that give you close to that 1-4 balance?
Yeah, pretty well. If you're basing everything else on just like whole unprocessed plant foods, you'd be doing pretty well there.
Okay. So that's why a lot of the plant-based doctors recommend that a tablespoon a day, no more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's interesting, because that's exactly how I live, and it really works. You live this way, you look super healthy. I've never felt so much healthy. I've never felt this healthy in my life. So once we can get these principles down pat and understand how to put it onto our plate, it really does make a difference in your life and your energy levels, and these aches and pains and these inflammatory diseases start to, disappear.
Yep, absolutely. Like there's this one person I always use as an example, just because he did so well. When I first saw him as a patient, he could barely walk through the door because he just had a heart attack, and he had early stage prostate cancer, like he had hemorrhoids, he had gout, like he just was not in a good space. And I don't need to see him as a patient anymore, but I bumped into him a few months ago, and he'd just gotten back from Europe where he'd gone on a hiking holiday. So from not being able to walk to hiking mountains, like, power of plants, man, it's all good.
It's so good. And how rewarding is that, to be able to help someone go from that sort of condition where it's uncomfortable to move, you don't feel well, and life is like heavy and depressing and scary, to then transfer that to, transform into somebody that has got great health, that's able to go and enjoy life again.
Exactly.
How does that make you feel to help people do that?
Oh, it's the best job in the world. It really is. Like, I mean, it can be frustrating at times, and sometimes you just want to bang your head up against a wall, but it's so rewarding. Like, I'm helping people get their health back and in turn get their life back. So, yeah, it's the best job.
Yeah, well done. Well done. So I suppose you see a lot of that happening, do you? The ones that you can get to eat the food?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you give them recipes and things?
Yeah. So I do give them recipes. If they've got Netflix, I'll always direct them to watching Forks Over Knives, because I find that's a big help. Yeah. And I'm just in the process of trying to get together like a monthly potluck, because I think the thing that's missing, especially in regional, rural areas, is that social support system, which is so important for helping, people stay with the change.
Yeah, it is an important topic. I found that with our community, like the program I run, one of the key parts to it is the community. Even though it's all online, but we're all in there together and we all support each other. And those that are have been doing it for 18 months or 2 years, their whole life has changed. And then when new people join, they see that and gives them the hope and possibility. And then everyone just encourages each other, because It's a different world outside, and it's a haven when you can get everyone that's like-minded, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So it
where are
can
you?
be sorry.
There you go.
I was just going to say it can be a little bit of a lonely space because it's not the norm yet. So finding that community is so important.
Yeah. Especially in rural areas, like you say. So whereabouts are you?
I'm based in a town called Boona in Queensland, so it's about an hour and a half southwest of Brisbane. So directly inland from the Gold Coast, basically.
Ah, okay. I know that area. I haven't been out to that area, but I know it on the map. So what's the population out there?
The town itself is only a couple of thousand, but in the actual catchment area for the council, there's probably around 4,000 or so.
Okay. So small community. And, yep. Yeah, well, that's excellent that you're out in rural places because it sounds like they need it there because,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they don't get the same sort of support that we get on the coast.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be really frustrating at times. A lot of people refer to me as that crazy vegetable lady, but you're dead on. These are the people that actually need to hear the message and could really benefit from it. So
yeah, they really can. You have to share this interview with them. So So tell me, you're involved with the Doctors for Nutrition, which is an amazing, organisation that's just started. Well, it started, they've just formulated it all now, but I remember a couple of years ago they started bringing doctors from America, and they've asked me to speak there as a case study and with reversing heart disease. And I know that you spoke in Brisbane on a panel. So tell us about Doctors for Nutrition and what they're about and why you decided to get involved with them, and what sort of work are they doing?
Yeah, so basically it's a new health promotion charity, and we want to bring food back to healthcare, basically evidence-based nutrition back to healthcare, because that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and at the moment it's mainly missing. So there's a few different avenues that we want to kind of tackle. So there's going to be advocacy work. We're hoping to promote this and work in with hospitals and, review the menu a little bit. Health education to doctors, because, doctors don't get that much nutrition training in their degrees. So that's a really big component of it. And just general public health promotion as well. So getting the message out there about the power of whole food plant-based. So we recently had a big conference in Melbourne. I was really lucky I got to speak at that, and it was just amazing. I've never been to such welcoming, positive kind of conference. It was just the highlight of my year so far, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And we had Neil come out, Dr. Scott Stoll came out as well, Dr. Alan Desmond from the UK. So we had, world-class speakers as well as a range of local Australian and New Zealand speakers. And there's been a lot of flow on from that as well. So hopefully, the ball's well and truly rolling now and we'll be able to achieve some positive things this year. But I would recommend the conference to anyone who's interested in plant-based nutrition or lifestyle medicine, because there'll be another one next year. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. But yeah, we're still in the initial stages, but for anyone who's interested, please do have a bit of a Google and check out Doctors for Nutrition. They're across all social media with Doctors for Nutrition as well. And we'd love your support. So please do check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone check them out, because what I love about what they're doing is, educating doctors that helping them become aware that a plant-based diet can actually help prevent and reverse these diseases. Because one of the things that's close to my heart and one of my missions is that, if someone has heart disease or type 2 diabetes or autoimmune diseases or is obese, if they sit down with their doctor, a specialist or a GP, that doctor gives them a choice and says to them, look, you can go down the medications, and at the start we probably need to do that because it could be dangerous if we don't. But the medications, if you stay on them long term, you're going to you're going to stay alive, but you're not going to feel too good, and we might have to give other meds to help overcome side effects. Or you can choose a whole food plant-based diet, which has been shown in many cases to reverse this condition that you've got. You're going to feel the best you've ever felt in your life. You won't have to take medications, but you will have to make some lifestyle changes. But we'll support you. We have people that we can refer you to that will support you in making the shift. But the choice is yours, and we're happy to help you either way. Because the reason why I want that, I never got that choice. I had to go find this whole food plant-based diet.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the doctors for nutrition are actually a key component in helping that choice become available into the future. It won't happen overnight, but I think, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be a different story.
I think so, yeah. I'm very excited.
And I'm glad you're involved with it because, you're passionate about it, you live it, and, you practice it with patients. You help people get well eating this way. So, kudos to you. Well done.
Right back at you as well. Thank you for all the amazing work you do. So, I first stumbled across you actually at the Kim Williams event a few years ago, and just the way you presented, you just, you touched everyone in the room. So the work you're doing is so, so valuable, and the way you present it, the message you have is amazing. So it's been really lovely to see your business kind of grow over the last few years too. So
yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's pretty special to be able to help people eat this way. And being a chef, it's nice to get in the kitchen and make some nice stuff and give people some tools that they may not have had before, that now they can make food that heals. Totally.
Because ultimately we're going to win them over with the food, right? So
yeah, well, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. It's the food. Yeah. Like Michael Clapper, Dr. Michael Clapper, he always says, it's the food. I think he's got a sign in his practice that says it's the food over his shoulder when a patient's sitting in front of him. But it really is. You start eating a whole food plant-based diet and your health improves.
Yep, absolutely.
It just happens. If we don't eat it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, because you get more energy. So then you'll want to start moving your body. So you'll start exercising and, definitely.
Totally. So if you were to give people listening to this now, if there was 2 or 3 things that could help them on their journey to improving their health and transforming, some of these lifestyle diseases, what are the top 3 things that you would say to them, like start doing this or focusing on these? Okay. What would you recommend?
Food specifically, or just
everything?
In general?
Whatever you think is right.
Well, I would actually say if you have it available to watch Forks Over Knives, because I find that's really powerful. It's motivating for people to actually then make the change. Number 2, I would say go to an event like you run, or at least get involved in the online space with like Whole Food Plant-Based Australia, or link up with the plant-powered pods in your city and start to reach out and talk to people who are eating this way, because that's going to be a really big help. And then specifically with the diet, if they're not ready to jump in and go, cold tofurkey, I'd say at least start adding in some legumes and a whole bunch of leafy greens as a starting point.
Yeah, great tips. Legumes and leafy greens, my fave. I crave leafy greens now like I used to crave junk food.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I listened to Clint Patterson once say he used to just eat the leaves out of the bag, and I thought, well, that's a little bit weird, but I totally would do that now. Like, they're just amazing.
Me too. You start to taste the sweetness in a lettuce as well as a bit of astringent. You get your palate shifts, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Totally. Excellent. So, Emma, it's been awesome chatting to you. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, I'll put all your contact details under the video in the magazine and on our website and in social media. And, so if anybody is up in Northern Queensland, do you just do, like, physical consultations, or do you do it online as well?
Yeah, no, I do Skype or through a Zoom meeting. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if any of you want to talk to, somebody that really understands plant-based nutrition, is qualified in nutrition, and is a dietitian, go and check out Emma, because I'm sure she can help you. She's helped quite a number of people already, and it's wonderful work you're doing. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
My pleasure.